You had Chris Hogan have the same output as Julio Jones, right?
Absolutely. I had Chris Hogan scoring 3 lacrosse goals in that same game, too. No, nobody had that. How could anybody predict that Chris Hogan would have the same production as the world's best wide receiver, which I think Julio Jones has become at this point? But it is a testament to what Belichick and the Patriots do. You know, they go out and they get this guy, Chris Hogan, from the scrap pile from the Bills, and they turn him into a superstar in the biggest game of his life. Of course, that's how it happened.
Okay, so wait, let's have this kind of quick aside discussion. We have a tendency to do this. Julio Jones has been awesome all year. He did have the 300-yard receiving game, but if the discussion is he's the best now because he just had a great game against an atrocious secondary in the Green Bay Packers, like who else is in that? Odell Beckham Jr. is in that discussion. Antonio Brown's in that discussion. Who else is in that legitimate discussion of the 5 best in the game? I don't think Dez would be.
No. I think not. We're not doing it like he's the best. I'm saying like he's the best right now. Like he holds the 2016. If there was a championship belt for the best wide receiver, he'd be the guy who had that. That's something Bill Barnwell created for running backs, and I think it makes sense. Doug, I would say I give it to Julio. He's led the league in yards per game, not total yards necessarily, the last 2 years. To me, when he's healthy, he's the most dominant, physical, freakish receiver. And the Packers did him a lot of favors on Sunday. They didn't cover him very well, but he did take a couple grown men on that one long touchdown run and emasculate them in front of a national television audience. He made a somersault catch. He can do everything. He runs routes. He's the biggest physical freak. So I give him the nod a little bit over Antonio Brown, who I would have had in that position after the 2015 season.
I'd have OBJ as the second best. Whatever. He's not as physically dominant, but incredibly gifted when he catches a football. But still, I mean, like, look, it's an argument. That's what happens when you go to a Super Bowl. Okay, let's go to the Packers. The defense had been an issue. They'd have all kinds of injury issues, and even Burnett was, hurt in their last game. How much of this was the Falcons? How much of it was the Packers?
I think it was more the Falcons than anything else. I mean, this is a team that they've scored on every single opening drive since their bye. I think it was week 12. They came out against the Cardinals, marched down the field, scored on their first drive. And it just sets the tone with these. Most of them have been long drives. I think the average is like 8 plays and 61 yards on these touchdown drives, 8 straight weeks now. And it really does just set the tone for how you're going to try and dominate a team. And then when the Packers offense goes out there and they play for a field goal early, which is a mistake off the bat because your defense isn't very good, they missed the field goal. I think was the first missed field goal of the playoffs, maybe, and the first for Mason Crosby in like 4 years or something like that. And then Aaron Ripkowski fumbles in the end zone. The Packers got in such a hole and were so conservative with the way they approached fourth down that, to me, they set the Falcons up nicely for Atlanta doing what they want to do, which is, sustain drives and then create explosive plays with Julio Jones and all the talent they have at the skill position players. I just think Atlanta's loaded, and I think Kyle Shanahan, is locked in as a play caller, and Matt Ryan is locked in as a quarterback, and they're just on this roll right now offensively, and they're really tough to stop. So I don't think it was necessarily Green Bay's defense being terrible so much as it was Atlanta's offense being fantastic.
How big a fix is that Green Bay Packer defense?
It's pretty big. They have talent, and they lost Sam Shields in week 1. I think that injury had a pretty big trickle-down effect on them. They have not done a terrific job. Ted Thompson, you see these GMs that sometimes, we laud them for being conservative in their approach to spending money in free agency. But I do think that you see some of the losses for that Green Bay defense, and you see them playing well, elsewhere. Like Casey Hayward was fantastic for the Chargers. You wonder if they wouldn't have been better off spending a little bit of money on there, and they haven't necessarily hit on all their defensive picks in recent years. And for a while there, they were dropping a first-round pick on a defensive lineman every year, and it wasn't panning out. I think it's a pretty big fix. The good news is you can mask some of the flaws on defense by having a really good offense. And when you have Aaron Rodgers, it's not that difficult to have a really good offense.
Okay, let's go to the AFC side. How much of it was the Patriots, and how much of it is that Steelers' secondary had been awful all year?
Yeah, I think the Steelers, they picked a bad week. So I mean, I don't want to compare the two, but it's like receivers doing. Again, I don't think that Antonio Brown's Facebook Live video affected the outcome of that game, but it was a bad week to have a bad week, and the Steelers as a whole. I mean, Kobe Hamilton and Sammy Coates, who you don't want to be targeting in a perfect world, combined for more targets than Antonio Brown. And certainly, that you don't want that production. Le'Veon Bell got hurt. The secondary forgot that Chris Hogan existed. And treated him like he was invisible, floating through the secondary, and you just can't do that. When you go to Foxborough and you're playing Tom Brady and the Patriots, and Mike Mitchell said afterwards they weren't prepared for the flea flicker. They weren't even looking for it. When you go to New England and you have all these busted coverages and you have these trick plays picking up chunk yards, and you're not executing yourself on offense, it's going to be really tough to beat the Patriots. It's a hard job to do in the first place, and if you show up with your B game on defense, then you're definitely not going to win. So I think you gotta blame a Steelers defense that certainly looked good for the second half of the season. I think under 17 points allowed over the course of their 8-game winning streak, and then they just get blasted by New England.
Will Brinson, CBSSports.com, covering the National Football League, joining us on the Doug Gottlieb Show, CBS Sports Radio. If Tom Brady wins Super Bowl, that's his 5th Super Bowl. That puts him in GOAT category. However, if Matt Ryan wins the Super Bowl, you have a very, very good possibility he's the league's MVP. League MVP, win a Super Bowl. That puts him in another stratosphere. But, Brady's already won one, but it would only be one for Ryan. Whose legacy is more affected by a win a week from Saturday?
I think it's Matt Ryan, and I don't know that it's that close, because for me, Tom Brady, and this is a very generational thing, I think. I think some people lean towards Joe Montana, and that's totally fine. I mean, it's a good debate as the greatest quarterback ever. I'll take Brady, and I don't like when people discount him because Joe Montana never lost a Super Bowl, as if making it to more Super Bowls is somehow a negative thing on your resume. So to me, I'm not elevating Brady any further than he already is if he wins the Super Bowl. He's already there for greatest of all time. But the difference in Matt Ryan from the guy that ended 2015 as maybe the 4th best quarterback in his own division behind Jameis, Drew Brees, Cam Newton, and Ryan. I mean, Ryan was there. It's an argument you could make, to suddenly being a guy who's we're going to spend all offseason tossing around the E word, talking about whether he's elite or not. And if he wins the MVP and he wins the Super Bowl, and he probably wins Super Bowl MVP, then I think you're putting him in a conversation where he's on a trajectory for the Hall of Fame if he continues to play well throughout the course of his career. So to me, the difference between what Matt Ryan could have on the line and what Tom Brady has on the line is pretty startling.
Who is the league's MVP?
It's Matt Ryan, and it's not close. Look, Aaron Rodgers was great in the second half. He was okay in the first half. Matt Ryan did it coast to coast. He put up numbers on par with Aaron Rodgers in 2011 when he was the clear-cut MVP, and Peyton Manning in 2004 when he was the clear-cut MVP. It should be an easy choice, and if Ryan's last name was Brady, Rodgers, or Manning, we wouldn't even be having the discussion.
What I said was, I think he's had the best season. I thought Aaron Rodgers has had the most valuable season. And then I would say that Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers are the 2 best quarterbacks in the NFL. How do you fall in that discussion?
I think that's fair. I mean, I disagree, obviously, with the most value, but I think that the Aaron Rodgers value is high.
I hate to interrupt you, but I know you have other things you have to do, but here's my way of thinking. Again, I think Matt Ryan had an outstanding year. I do think you could put other quarterbacks in that situation, and they'd be pretty good. They wouldn't be to his level. And only Aaron Rodgers could do what he did with that team. The defense stinks. I don't think the wide receivers are great, and they had a wide receiver playing running back. He's the only guy who could do what he did. That's the impetus of where the MVP, how I would put him in a true value category.
Yeah, look, I mean, Aaron Rodgers was fantastic, and he played in a system where it was a playground type system. He did have I think Jordy Nelson led the league in receiving touchdowns. I know you could point out that having Aaron Rodgers helped that. I thought Jordy Nelson came back and was much better after he got healthy.
Yep.
And look, Matt Ryan's got a fantastic cast around him. He's got great skill position weapons. I don't ding him so much for that. I do think Brady and Rodgers are 1 and 2 in the quarterbacks in the league when they're healthy and when they're playing well and playing the way they did. But to me, Matt Ryan's season was the most valuable because it put the Falcons in the position to get home field. You know, they got lucky with the Cowboys losing, but they put him into the Super Bowl. And I get it. It's only the regular season, but he was tremendous throughout the entire year. And I think we kind of ding him because he didn't have any peaks and valleys. He didn't have that narrative that we could get behind. He didn't promise to run the table the way that Rodgers did and then mystically pull it off. And so I think that kind of hurts him because he's a little too vanilla in some instances.
I've heard I got 30 seconds with you. You give you give Bill Belichick 2 weeks to prepare. We know they're going to take away Julio Jones and make, just like they did with Antonio Brown, make somebody else beat you. Is it enough? Patriots are favorites. Who do you like early on?
I like the Falcons. I had a Madden simulation before the season that actually predicted the Falcons would win. So who knew? I think the difference between what you see with Atlanta is that it's harder to double Julio and just totally wipe him out than maybe it is with Antonio Brown. And when you're talking about the weapons that the Patriots have on defense. And I think the secondary weapons for Atlanta are substantially better than what Pittsburgh was dealing with late in that game. Taylor Gabriel, Mohamed Sanu, Devonta Freeman, Tevin Coleman. The distribution they had against Green Bay, 8 guys caught a pass in the first half. Matt Ryan's a point guard out there, and I think they'll be able to do that. It won't be quite as easy, though. I think it'll be a great Super Bowl, but Falcons win in a close one.